recovering human thriving, exceptional health as well as taking care of the planet plus climate. Go right where health and absence of disease is obvious. We're in a race for solutions to the growing prevalence of Alzheimer's disease, related dementia and degenerative diseases. Abstract. Roughly over half of all 8 billion people on this planet will suffer for a significant period of their lives, and subsequently die under perhaps dire conditions of cancer or Alzheimer's. And obviously there are other degenerative diseases too. There is a community, Semaine and Mozaton, living in the midst of the Amazon forest, which is relatively free of all these diseases, and they are researched for over 10 years. Nevertheless, no recommendations or action plan is developed. That should mean we are losing this race for solutions. We claim that is because the researchers do not consider and consequently do not recognize the real difference, which is that all their food comes from carbon-enriched carbon agroforests instead of from agriculture, with its typical tilling and use of chemicals, which together emit carbon dioxide and reduce microbiological activity. This hypothesis needs to be tested urgently, and if the result is positive, this should be implemented in a global action plan, especially since these or similar carbon-enriched carbon agroforests can remove all post-industrial carbon dioxide from the global atmosphere, which according to many specialists should resolve all our climate challenges. We in PDB Safe Haven will try to test this hypothesis as soon as possible, and will let you know the results. Article 1. Roughly over half of all 8 billion people on this planet will suffer for a significant period of their lives, and subsequently die under perhaps dire conditions of cancer or Alzheimer's. And obviously there are other degenerative diseases too. 2. Dr. Kent-Thornburg predicted this as well as the consequential collapse of life expectancy, because he took notice of the exponential rise. He calls it an epidemic of degenerative diseases. Kent-Thornburg, 2015. What did he do that others did not? 3. Kent-Thornburg looked at markers for the future, and extrapolated to the future, while others only looked at the past, and consequently cannot extrapolate correctly to the future. Alzheimer's is only one of several manifestation forms of dementia. 4. Cancer and Alzheimer's are better known than most other degenerative diseases, but they are all a kind of family, and lead to loss of quality of life and ultimately to death. The rise of cancer and Alzheimer's together with the other degenerative diseases looks like a burden and threat for all 8 billion people, and this urgently needs a solution or rather an action plan. 5. We claim it to be kind of inhuman not to recognize and solve this burden and threat, if we would have the chance. It also not only sort of ruins the lives of the victims, but probably also, possibly to a lesser extent, that of their own family. Even after the victim dies, it remains a kind of threat for all other members of the family, and especially for the children. 6. If there was a whole community of people that have the best heart and brain health in the whole world and do not suffer the mentioned Alzheimer's or cancer, couldn't that be important for these 8 billion people which if no solution is found are at least partially sort of condemned? 7. Well, there is such a community, and there are probably many more such communities in the same region, as well as the whole Amazon forest, and they have been studied for over 10 years, and importantly across all age groups. 8. The problem is that the actual researchers or scientists on the case did not translate their findings and did not pass recommendations, or a personal or collective action plan to these 8 billion humans, which in our opinion are under threat of degenerative diseases. 9. Even with the best intentions, as long as the researchers or scientists do not pass on recommendations to the general public in a clear manner, this research is kind of a waste of potential, time, money, and one of the few chances, and as explained above, kind of indirectly prejudices 8 billion humans. 10. When the researchers perceive that a group seems to be free of degeneration and degenerative diseases, and they cannot find out why, these researchers should make a list with all the differences, and test them, and if necessary this so one by one. 11. There are only few significant differences. The members of the studied group feed themselves from forests or carbon agroforests that were made more fertile, with humus and carbon, by their ancestors in the past, this while all other roughly 8 billion humans feed themselves from agriculture, monocultures that involve tilling, and as we know the areas that today are agricultural lands became so because of deforestation. So, there could be a bifurcation here between foods from areas that are forested, agroforest, or deforested, for agriculture. Carbon agroforests present high microbial activity in the soil and agriculture presents low microbial activity in the soil. Carbon agroforests are extremely carbon-rich, including the soil, and agriculture is carbon-poor. Tilling and chemicals oxidize organic matter and release carbon dioxide. Carbon-rich are the soils in the carbon agroforests, which absorb enormous amounts of carbon from the atmosphere. These amounts are 100 times more than what can be absorbed by agricultural crops. This is equivalent to the production, which also can be 100 times more in carbon agroforests. These claims could raise eyebrows because the general public and even scientists are very often not aware of what an ideal and mature carbon agroforest is. Like the Amazon forest in regions with ADE soils. As an example, the Amazon forest features over 100 times the biomass that even the most productive agriculture presents: crowns, stems, root system, and last but not least microbial biomass in the carbon-rich soils. You can compare it with a ship that is 100 times larger and that can transport 100 times more. In the case of the Amazon forest, and also of carbon agroforests, there are additional positive feedbacks that add up even more, with amongst many others feedbacks. A. The root system pumps up water and minerals that is out of reach for agricultural crops. B. The biotic pump effect of the forest and by the forest-emitted aerosols attract rain and make it pour down. The above extreme capacity to sequester carbon and to produce foods and products is presented in other videos. 12. Researchers speak about subsistence lifestyle. What modern people probably do not want and do not have in their reach, but do not mention the above different or bifurcated characteristics, and even rarely mention that the food these exceptionally healthy people eat comes from forest, more specifically from tropical forest. At least they do not in the context, merely at the sidelines. 13. Food that comes from forest, more specifically from tropical forest. Modern people all over the world, even in the cities, could very well prefer these if they only would be correctly informed about the potential benefits. 14. There is a strong correlation between cognitive decline and degeneration on one hand, and susceptibility for infections, including the infections that lead to epidemics and pandemics, on the other hand. 15. So, if carbon agroforest foods and intermittent fasting also practiced by the group studied, decrease the rate of degeneration and the development of degenerative diseases, people who consume carbon agroforest foods will not only suffer less degeneration and degenerative diseases, but will also be less prone to infections, epidemics, and pandemics, and consequently, also less prone to the predicted advances of zoonoses, as well as disease X, both predicted by WHO representatives, also reporting that the latter could be 20 times more deadly than the last pandemic that began in 2019. To be continued.